A Song of Ice and Fire is rich with very interesting and complex characters. However, the one with probably the most fascinating story is Brynden Rivers, also known as the Three-Eyed Raven. Even though he physically only appears in the last book of the main series, his presence is strongly felt throughout the whole series, and almost every single major event that took place after his birth can be traced to him. He made the Song of Ice and Fire possible, but in order to achieve such levels, he had a long way to go. Brynden was born in 175 AC at King's Landing. During that time, Aegon IV was the ruler of Westeros, who is considered to be one of the worst Targaryen kings, hence the alias the Unworthy. He was married to his sister, Rhaenys Targaryen, with whom he had two children, Daeron and Daenerys Targaryens. However, he had a lot of lovers and fathered several bastards, the most important among them being Daemon Waters, Aegon Rivers, Shiera Seastar, and Brynden Rivers, who would later become the infamous Three-Eyed Crow. Even compared to the other Targaryens, who are characterized by their distinctive alienoid appearance, Brynden drastically distinguished himself physically. He was an albino and thus had milk-white skin, long white hair, and red eyes. Not the traditional purple eyes that the Targaryens usually have. On the right side of his face, he had a red wine-stained birthmark that extended from his throat up to his right cheek. The birthmark was the reason why he was called Bloodraven, as it was said to look somewhat like a raven drawn in blood. His mother was Lady Melissa Blackwood, whose elevation at court came at the expense of Aegon's prior mistress, Barba Bracken, and her bastard son Aegon Rivers. As a result of this, and their house's natural enemy, Aegor and Brynden grew up as fierce rivals. Beside their mother's house's enmity, their rivalry reached new levels due to their sister, Shiera Seastar, who was renowned as a beauty and seductress. Aegor and Brynden started competing with each other for her love, and in the end she chose Brynden, which only increased the hatred the other brothers had with each other. Along with all the noble-born bastards of the king, Bloodraven was legitimized on his father's deathbed in 184 AC and later obtained Dark Sister, one of the two Targaryen Valyrian steel swords. The other, Blackfyre, was given to Daemon Blackfyre, one of Brynden's half-brothers. Brynden's rivalry with Aegor and, by extension, their mutual elder half-brother Daemon Blackfyre, who was close friends and allies with Aegor, made him a natural ally of Aegon IV's legitimate son and heir, Daeron II Targaryen. The situation between the half-siblings created a very complex state after the death of Aegon IV. Daemon Blackfyre became convinced that Daeron was the illegitimate bastard of Aegon's sister wife Rhaenys by their brother, Aemon the Dragon Knight. He claimed the Iron Throne as the eldest natural-born son of Aegon IV in 195 AC. Aegor, by now a great knight nicknamed Bittersteel, joined in Daemon's rebellion whilst Bloodraven swore fealty to King Daeron II. The situation was very similar to the Dance of the Dragons. House Targaryen was cut in half between two rival parties once more and was very close to extinction. The conflict was called the Blackfyre Rebellion, which lasted several decades. Brynden proved to be the biggest asset for Daeron II during the conflict. Unlike the just-as-obsessed Daeron and his honorable warrior sons Baelor and Maekar, Bloodraven was cold-blooded and ruthless. His unit of 300 elite archers carrying weirwood bows, the Raven's Teeth, became one of the most feared battlefield formations in Daeron's army, known for shooting into their own ranks if it meant achieving larger enemy casualties. At the Battle of the Redgrass Field, the Raven's Teeth gained the Weeping Ridge and rained arrows down onto the Blackfyres from 300 yards away, killing first Daemon's eldest son Aegon. Bloodraven knew that Daemon would not leave his dying son alone in his final moments, which proved to be the case. Daemon ran to his son, which made him drop his guard. This was the moment Bloodraven used to shoot 7 arrows at him, and finally he finished Aegon's twin, Aemon, who tried to take his father's legendary sword, Blackfyre. However, that moment turned out to be fatal for him and was slain by his uncle, just like his brother and father. The arrows are said to have been driven by Brynden's sorcery, and people later named Brynden a kinslayer. Daemon's death led the rebels to rout, but some were rallied by Azor Rivers in a mad charge. These two had a bloody duel where Bitter Steel cut out Bloodraven's left eye in a fury. However, Bloodraven managed to get the upper hand thanks to his Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister, and forced Azor and the remaining Blackfyre forces to retreat. The rebellion was crushed, and Bloodraven's loyalty was proven. However, from this day on, even though he was literally the war hero, he was known as a kinslayer. The act of killing his half-brother perfectly encapsulates Bloodraven's philosophy. Faced with the potential of civil war and the destruction of the realm, Bloodraven chose to eliminate a direct threat to peace, prioritizing the greater good over familial bonds. This decision, while effective in maintaining stability, marked him with the indelible stigma of kinslaying, demonstrating his willingness to bear personal infamy for the sake of the realm. 209 AC was a very difficult period for Westeros, since the Great Spring Sickness fell over the realm. The plague killed King Daeron II and his two grandsons, who were also his heirs, Valar and Mataris Targaryen. That was also the year when his eldest son, Baelor II, died as well, at the tourney of Ashford Meadow, which left his second son, Aerys I, to succeed his father. However, Aerys was said to be a bookish man who preferred reading to ruling, and this is why, upon becoming king, Aerys appointed his uncle Brynden Rivers, known as Bloodraven, as the hand of the king and let him rule while he occupied himself with the study of books and lore. His reign as hand coincided with one of the harshest periods for the Seven Kingdoms. Beside the Great Spring Sickness, which killed countless people in Westeros, there was also drought. Given his lack of popularity among the people, he was used as a scapegoat by them, who were calling him a kinslayer, a bastard, and a sorcerer, because just like the king, Bloodraven was also known to be interested in magic. Some people allege that Brynden and his lover, his half-sister Shiera Seastar, used sorcery to uncover secrets. He was also rumored to be able to change faces, which might very well be true. In 2012 AC, Daemon Blackfyre's third son, Daemon II, tries to enact the Second Rebellion. However, Bloodraven's spies uncover the plot with the help of a very suspicious guy named Maynard Plum. It has been widely speculated that Sir Maynard Plum, a character in The Mystery Knight, is really Brynden Rivers wearing a glamour. There are several interesting hints to support this theory. For example, Maynard and Bloodraven are both thin with long straight hair. Beside that, he also knows way too much about current events for a hedge knight. For example, Maynard knows about the Blackfyre conspiracy and urges Dunk to leave. He specifically suggests him to go to Summerhall. Maynard takes an interest in Dunk and Egg's presence at White Walls during the Second Blackfyre Rebellion. Both Maynard and Bloodraven describe the wedding as a nest of adders. Maynard knows about Egg's true identity and the ring hidden in his boot. On one occasion, Maynard calls Duncan by his childhood name, Dunk. He also wears a moonstone brooch that the narration calls attention to, which could be an anchor for his spells, much like Melisandre's ruby choker, and in the end, Maynard is not seen or heard from again when Brynden appears, having vanished shortly before. So we can see that there is some truth behind the rumors about him using magic and sorcery. He uses this magic to spy and control people, and his rebellion was no exception. Through his informants, including a Verwell man-at-arms and a troop of comic dwarfs, Brynden was aware of a plot at White Walls to put Daemon II Blackfyre forward as the legitimate lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Brynden marched on the tourney with 300 Raven's Teeth, 3 brothers of the Kingsguard, 500 other knights, and 5,000 infantry drawn from the Crown Lands and Riverlands. Alarmed by the amount of support Brynden had, Daemon tried to rally the people at the tourney to fight with him, though lacked any real support. Daemon then challenged the hand to single combat, but Brynden Brynden refused and immediately arrested Daemon, thus ending the Second Blackfyre rebellion before it even began. Daemon was kept in captivity rather than executed with the other rebel leaders, ensuring that Azor Rivers could not name Daemon's younger brother Haegon as the new lord to House Blackfyre. Bloodraven was infamous for his extensive network of spies known as Little Birds, which he used to gather information and suppress dissent. This network allowed him to stay ahead of potential threats and rebellions, ensuring that he could act swiftly to neutralize any challengers to the throne. It was said that Bloodraven had 1,000 eyes and one on his face and 1,000 of his spies. His main concerns were the Blackfyres. He even ignored the raid of Lord Dagon Greyjoy, who had terrorized the western coast, because his main concern was Tyrosh, where his half-brother Azor Rivers remained with the surviving children of Daemon Blackfyre in exile. However, Victarion Greyjoy recalls that even Dagon could not defeat the dragons, implying that the Targaryens intervened. The Blackfyres being the main concern for Bloodraven proved to be right, since in 219 AC they rebelled for a third time. Bittersteel launched a new invasion after crowning Haegon I Blackfyre as the fourth-born son of Daemon I Blackfyre. This new invasion took place late in the reign of King Aerys I Targaryen, who, as I said later, was not interested in the details of ruling. The king's younger brother, Prince Maekar Targaryen, on the other hand, showed his leadership during the conflict. His son, Prince Aerion, fought in the war as well, as did Prince Aegon, showing his courage. The Third Blackfyre Rebellion featured the second duel between Bittersteel and Bloodraven. At the end of the final battle, the pretender, Haegon I, was dishonorably killed after he had surrendered and had given up his sword. Bittersteel was taken captive and brought in chains to the Red Keep in King's Landing, where Aerion and Bloodraven urged Aerys I to have Azor executed. While Bittersteel was found guilty of high treason, the king spared his life and ordered that Bittersteel be sent to the wall instead of facing execution. The rebels learned of Bittersteel's fate, as there were still many Blackfyre friends at court who were willing to inform Aegor's supporters. The ship carrying Azor to the Night's Watch was taken in the Narrow Sea, while on the way to Eastwatch by the Sea, and Bittersteel was freed and returned to the sellsword company he had founded, the Golden Company. Bittersteel returned to Tyrosh, and before the year had ended, he crowned Haegon's eldest son Daemon. Thus, the Blackfyre plotting continued. Brynden continued as hand of Aerys' successor, his brother Maekar I, in 221 AC. After Maekar's death in 233 AC, Brynden, as the hand of the king, called a great council in King's Landing to discuss the issue of succession, since both of his heirs were dead by that time. Daeron the Drunken died by STDs, while Aerion died screaming after drinking a cup of wildfire, believing it would transform him into a dragon. The deaths of both of the king's heirs caused succession crisis, which is why Brynden called for a great council. Although he was legitimized and half Targaryen himself, Brynden did not put forth a claim to the succession. Aenys Blackfyre, son of Haegon Blackfyre, wished to peacefully participate in the Great Council, and Brynden offered him safe conduct to King's Landing from Tyrosh. When Aenys arrived in King's Landing, he was arrested by the Goldcloaks and then beheaded in the Red Keep. The Great Council chose Maekar's son to succeed as King Aegon V Targaryen, whose first act as king was to arrest Brynden for the murder of Aenys. Brynden rebuked that he had sacrificed his honor for the good of the realm, but Aegon refused to set Brynden free. Aegon offered Brynden the option to join the Night's Watch as an alternative, which he accepted. Brynden was escorted to the wall by Duncan the Tall, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and was accompanied by his grandnephew Aemon Targaryen, and allegedly took Dark Sister with him, though it seems unlikely that Aegon V would willingly let Brynden take it. Regardless, there he became one of the more renowned Lord Commanders of the Night's Watch, gaining the position in 239 AC. However, he disappeared while beyond the wall in 252 AC. The very next time when we meet him is 50 years after his disappearance. Bran Stark, Jojen Reed, Meera Reed, and Hodor reach Brynden with the assistance of Cold Hands. Brynden has since become near skeletal at 125 years old, with the weirwood tree growing out of his missing eye. In the span of 50 years, he has changed drastically, from the royal bastard to weird, magical tree deity. How did this happen, and what caused this change? Well, magic in Game of Thrones, in Westeros more precisely, is connected to family heritage. For example, the Targaryens have the blood of Valyria, which connects them to dragons and fire magic. There are also the Starks, who, thanks to their blood of the First Men, are connected to skin-changing and warging abilities. Bloodraven is a special case. He has both the blood of Valyria through his father and the blood of the First Men through his mother. Just like most of the houses from the north, the Blackwood family are descended from the First Men. Their sigil is also a weirwood tree, which is the symbol of the old gods. Despite growing up in King's Landing alongside his peers who were into the faith of the Seven, Bloodraven has been interested in the old gods from a very young age, which is hinted at by his longbow, which is made from a weirwood tree. Also, when you think about it, Bloodraven is almost like a physical embodiment of this religion. He has pale skin and red eyes, which makes him very similar to weirwood trees, which also have a very white bark and red sap eyes. Why would he go into such an extent to give up his humanity? What was his plan? Well, in the finale of House of the Dragon Season 2, we see Daemon interacting with the weirwood tree, which enabled him to see the vision of the future, Aegon's dream and the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. In this vision, we see Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne, but beside her we also see the others, as well as the dying and rebirth of the dragons. However, one character who looks unrelated to Daemon or Aegon's dream is Bloodraven. He most likely has a key role in the fulfillment of Aegon's dream, which would explain pretty much everything about his past actions, and this scene was a confirmation of his duty in the prophecy. In the Duncan Egg stories, we learn that Aerys read about the return of dragons in a prophecy. We do not know exactly which prophecy he was referring to, but it was most likely Aegon's prophecy about the prince who was promised. Beside Aerys, Daemon and Egg knew about this prophecy as well, and since much of his family was involved in the prophecy, it is quite possible that Bloodraven knew about it too. In fact, he was likely the most determined to fulfill the prophecy. Judging by Aerys's and Rhaegar's marriages, it seems that a particular Targaryen bloodline was expected to produce Azor Ahai, which was likely the reason why Bloodraven was so determined to end the threat of the Blackfyres once and for all. It wasn't merely because of his rivalry with Bittersteel or the instability they brought to the realm, but because he wanted to protect the specific Targaryen line destined to produce the hero who would unite the realms against the others. The protection of this Targaryen line is also evident in other cases. Bloodraven was the hand of the king during a very strange area for the Targaryens, with many dying under mysterious circumstances. While Daeron, Valar, and Mataris died naturally during the Great Spring Sickness, Baelor's death was more mysterious. He was accidentally killed by his brother Maekar during the tourney at Ashford Meadow, but Maekar claimed he didn't remember the blow that broke Baelor's skull. What if Maekar didn't actually do it, and it was Bloodraven whose skin changed into Maekar to kill Baelor? Though skin changing into another human is considered a major atrocity in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he might have done it. After Baelor, Valar, and Mataris, Aerys was next in line. He succeeded Daeron, but interestingly died with no heirs despite ruling for 11 years. Throughout his reign, he acknowledged 4 different heirs. The first was his brother Rhaegal, who suspiciously died in 215 AC after choking on a lamprey pie. In this case, there are many ways Bloodraven could have killed him, perhaps by simply poisoning the pie. His next heir, Aelor, was killed even more mysteriously. Apparently, Aelor was slain in a grotesque mishap by the hand of his twin sister and wife, Aelora, under circumstances that drove her mad with grief. Something that seems like Bloodraven's doing. In the end, Aerys recognized the 4th and last heir to the throne, his youngest brother, Maekar, who eventually succeeded him. Bloodraven remained Hand of the King during Maekar's reign, which lasted 12 years, ample time for Brynden to eliminate Daeron and Aemond, who also died under mysterious circumstances, ensuring that Egg would become king. He did all this to guarantee the birth of Azor Ahai through Aegon V's line. One of the main reasons Bloodraven was determined to make Aegon king, besides his being more honorable, sane, and normal compared to other candidates, was likely the fact that Aegon married Betha Blackwood, who had the blood of the First Men. This marked the first of many attempts to unite the blood of Valyria with that of the ancient First Men. Bloodraven discovered the true power of his First Men blood when he joined with the Werewoods, though he likely understood its potential earlier. He was likely a skin changer, able to warg into many ravens at once, and also a green seer, though we don't know when this power first manifested. It could be a coincidence that Egg married a member of Bloodraven's house and had children combining Targaryen and Blackwood genes, like Bloodraven himself, but it seems more deliberate. Bloodraven wanted the Targaryen line to possess the special blood that he had. However, this was not the last time those two bloodlines were combined. After Summerhall, Bloodraven's last pieces in play were Aerys and Rhaegar. As we know, Aerys succeeded Jaehaerys as king and slowly descended into madness. As Aerys lost his mind, Rhaegar became obsessed with prophecy. Initially, he believed he was the prince that was promised, but later decided it would be his son. Rhaegar's marriage to Elia Martell produced 2 children, but she was frail and sickly, likely unable to bear another. However, Rhaegar needed a 3rd child, convinced that the dragon must have 3 heads. Was this part of Bloodraven's plan? It seems likely that Bloodraven instilled this notion in Rhaegar's mind to set aside Elia and pursue another marriage with Greenseer blood. As Aerys descended into madness and paranoia, Rhaegar and his friend Oswell Went of the Kingsguard organized the famous tourney of Harrenhal. The tournament was clearly rigged for Rhaegar to win, as Barristan Selmy lamented his decision to let Rhaegar win. While Rhaegar was a decent warrior, he was no match for the Kingsguard he faced, especially Barristan the Bold. Rhaegar believed he needed to crown Lyanna Stark with a crown of blue roses, the crown of Garth Greenhand, the first king of the First Men, at the God's Eye. Rather than addressing his father's madness and quelling the rising unrest, Rhaegar chose to kidnap Lyanna Stark, dishonoring houses Stark, Baratheon, and Martell. Either Rhaegar was mad as his father, or Bloodraven and the Ghost truly convinced him he needed to create an ice and fire baby. However, the birth of Azor Ahai was not Bloodraven's only goal. He needed Bran as much as Jon. It seems that Bran had a special destiny as a Greenseer, much like Brynden, which is why Bloodraven visits him in his dreams as the Three-Eyed Crow. He believes Bran is crucial for the upcoming war against the White Walkers and prepares him to be his successor for the Weirwood throne. Currently, Bloodraven's actions have enabled the birth of Jon Snow, the supposed ice and fire baby, Daenerys, the mother of dragons, and Bran the Greenseer. Jon possesses both the blood of Greenseers and Dragon Lords, just like Brynden himself. Bran represents ice, Dany represents fire, and Jon is a blend of both, the 3 heads of Bloodraven's dragon. These 3 will play the most important roles in the fight against the others. However, Bloodraven's influence may extend even beyond the prophecy of the prince that was promised. We don't know exactly when the others began their aggression. The show suggests that Mance raiders started gathering the wildlings for their southern migration about 20 years ago, but this isn't definitive. However, it's clear that the Free Folk felt an immediate and impending threat that compelled them to move south. This happened before the return of dragons, the fall of the Starks in Winterfell, and the appearance of the Red Comet. The last major wildling invasion before our story was led by King Beyond the Wall Raymond Redbeard about 72 years prior, driven by the dwindling Night's Watch. Therefore, the return of the others as a threat likely occurred after this event, since Mance had to unite the wildlings anew. The others didn't start coming back during the Hardhome tragedy 600 years ago, a different tragedy in the books involving fire, when dragons arrived in Westeros with Aegon the Conqueror 300 years ago, when the Night Fort and Snowgate were abandoned, or even when the dragons died out around 150 years before the story begins. Their resurgence happened sometime within the last 72 years. So, what awoke them? What drove them to start moving south? Could Bloodraven and the Children of the Forest have influenced the others to invade? The timeline certainly fits. The timeline suggests that the return of the others aligns with Bloodraven's disappearance. They don't seem to have re-emerged during any significant events prior to that, and all the major events in the past 72 years that might relate to them occurred after Bloodraven took the Weirwood throne. Moreover, considering that Craster has an arrangement with the others where he provides them with children, the 48 years since Bloodraven's disappearance also correspond with Craster's apparent age. While it's possible that Bloodraven began his plans because he foresaw the others' return, there doesn't seem to be any event in the 30 years between the last wildling invasion and his disappearance that could have triggered the others' reawakening. If Bloodraven had noticed the White Walkers beginning to gather their forces while he was Lord Commander, it would make sense for him to have warned Aegon V. Even though Aegon was the king who exiled Bloodraven, that shouldn't have stopped him from alerting the realm. However, Aegon V seemed focused on reviving dragons to enforce reforms for the small folk, indicating that he wasn't warned about the threat of the others. Though the others appear to be an inherently hostile and ominous force, it's important to remember that they had remained on their side of the wall for thousands of years before our story begins. Neither the movements of men nor the presence of dragons in Westeros seemed to provoke them to move south. Historically, there is no evidence that the others gathered forces to march south at any time after the Long Night, so there's no clear indication that they possess expansionist tendencies or a desire to invade the southern lands. Their aggression only seems to have begun during Bloodraven's reign as the last Greenseer. So how could Bloodraven have instigated this? There are several possibilities. As the Three-Eyed Crow, a master of sending dreams, Bloodraven might have threatened the others with prophecies of their destruction, just as mankind has been receiving warnings of the others' return. Given that dragons are essentially the ultimate weapons against White Walkers, it's also possible that the plot to marry a Targaryen into the Stark family, thereby bringing dragon blood and dragons into the north, could have been perceived by the others as a significant threat, much like a Bay of Pigs situation where weapons of mass destruction are moving dangerously close to their territory. Perhaps the Starks historically repel the others, but the presence of dragons could spell their doom. While ice preserves, fire consumes. How better for Bloodraven to establish the absolute sovereign the kingdom needs than by creating an immediate threat for that sovereign to save Westeros from an endless winter? After all, nothing unites people and stops them from fighting one another like a common enemy. A good old other, if you will, to horrify everyone into setting aside their pride and ceasing their conflicts. The inhuman others are tailor-made for this role, especially since their army of the dead literally grows larger the more people kill each other. The more divided mankind is, the stronger the others become. Just look at how this impending icy doom has enabled Mance to unite the anarchist free folk. Is Mance uniting the wildlings a precursor to what Bloodraven expects to happen with the Seven Kingdoms? We've mentioned before how Bloodraven is willing to do anything to ensure stability, so it's not far-fetched to consider his connection with the White Walkers as well as the prophecy of the prince that was promised. Bloodraven's life and legacy are a tapestry of intrigue, power, and mysticism woven with threads of prophecy and dark arts. As Hand of the King, he shaped the political landscape of Westeros with ruthless efficiency, ensuring stability through fear and control. Yet his influence may have extended far beyond the mortal realm, reaching into the mysterious and mystical forces that govern the world. The possibility that Bloodraven, with his unparalleled knowledge of the arcane and his connection to the Weirwood network, might have been a hidden architect behind the success of the Azor Ahai prophecy opens a new dimension to his character. If true, it would suggest that his actions were not merely those of a pragmatic ruler, but of a man with a deep understanding of the world's esoteric forces and a willingness to manipulate them for a greater purpose. The speculation that Bloodraven could have played a role in the return of the others is equally compelling. Such a move, if intentional, would demonstrate his belief in the necessity of a greater struggle to force a hero capable of saving the world. It would paint him not just as a guardian of the realm, but as a master strategist playing a long game. One that spans centuries and involves the very survival of humanity. In the end, Bloodraven remains an enigma, a figure whose actions were driven by a complex blend of loyalty, pragmatism, and possibly a higher purpose. Whether remembered as a kinslayer, a master of shadows, or a hidden savior, his legacy continues to shape the fate of Westeros long after his physical presence has faded from the world. His story serves as a reminder that in the Game of Thrones, as in life, the lines between hero and villain are often blurred, and the true motives of those in power may only be understood long after they are gone.